The story that's developed in the last hour or so, the Government Gazette this morning, it's emerged that the National Transport Minister has signed regulations bringing a formal end to e-tolls in Gauteng. In the document, the Minister signs the rescission of the formal declaration of these sections of the Gauteng highways as toll roads. That rescission comes into effect from the 11th of April, call it 2 weeks from now. Wayne Duvenage is the person who founded the organisation Opposition to Urban Tolling Allowance. Outa has changed name and mission since then, but still very much the voice of people opposed to e-tolls in Gauteng. Wayne, good afternoon to you. There have been so many promises about the end of e-tolls. Is this it? Do you believe this really is the end of e-tolls?
This is it, Stephen. This is something to be celebrated. 12 years ago, we set out on a mission to challenge this and try and put a halt to it. It's gone through many iterations in courts, out of court, civil disobedience. But finally, the Gazette, to undo the initial gazettes that declared these roads as toll roads, has now been passed and published. So this is formally the end. It's a little few days later than one would have wanted, because the effective date is the 11th of April, not the 31st of March. But we're not going to quibble over a few days, because we've been waiting for this day for 12 years. So this is something to be celebrated, and is a very, very clear indication of the power of the people who will stand up and defy bad law. And that's what they've done, and very successfully. So well done to the public. This has been a long time coming, and I think I'm going to go and get some champagne this evening.
Just ahead of a long weekend. Look, Wayne, there's so many lessons to be drawn from this, and government had always argued that it had done proper consultation back in 2007, that sort of period. The argument that you brought and many others brought was that there was no public consultation, and as a result of that, people refused to pay. This takes us straight to what you're saying about the power of people in South Africa.
Yeah, it was. There was a little bit of public consultation, but it was meaningless. And the Constitution is very clear, Stephen, that public consultation needs to be meaningful. You need to be able to demonstrate that you rounded up as many of the stakeholders as you could, or certainly communicated it, invited them and got substantive input, and then applied your mind to that input. And none of that was really there. So aside from that, our biggest issue was that the scheme was it had corruption elements built into it. And it was unworkable, it was unenforceable, it was cumbersome administratively and in its implementation, and that the public's freedom of movement was going to be restricted. So there's a number of angles that just all these red flags are going up to say, look, this is not about we don't want to pay, this is not opposing the user pays principle, and neither was it opposing the use of technology. This was opposing a scheme that was always going to fail, a very, very expensive one, which also pushed revenue offshore, and we had to stand our ground as citizens and as a civil action movement.
There's several key moments along this very long journey that you've been on, Wayne, and it would seem to me that one of the key moments was when the Transport Department, when government, took a decision to not prosecute people who had not paid. And you very publicly, and I remember it very clearly, said that anyone who was prosecuted for not paying e-tolls, you would stand by them, you would help them out with a legal team. I mean, if the government had gone the other way, it would probably have been very different.
Yeah, very much so. You know, had government just worked with business at the time and civil society to find the solutions to all the problems that we were pointing out, and done it properly, I think we would be a long way down the road of a successful tolling scheme, one that needed to be priced far lower than what it was. It needed to be workable, needed to have the public's buy-in from a point of view is that it makes sense. But they went and really ruined it for government in the future for electronic tolling schemes, and I think they know that. So sadly, you know, government is its own worst enemy when it comes to not listening to the public and forging ahead with a scheme that they have not really applied their minds to. And so as they started to adopt their last line of defense or strategy was, well, if you don't pay, we're going to summons you. They were literally going to war with their citizens into a massive lawfare strategy, and that's not good for any government. And the citizens fought back and won. So we have power, and now we must exercise that power. And we did it, by the way, very constructively. We didn't have to burn the gantries down, and we didn't have to do anything else. We had to stand our ground and say this is bad law, and we need to defy it.
There's so many things that need to sort of be sorted out as a result. And one of the things that happened when e-tolls came around was that around middle-class braais in Gauteng, there was the question, will you pay for e-tolls or not? Will you get an e-tag? Some people were very proud of their e-tags. They said this showed that they obeyed the law, whether they disagreed with it or not, and I understand that argument. It does mean, though, that there was a large group of people who paid for e-tolls and a large group of people who didn't. And I cannot see the people who did pay getting that money back.
Yeah, no, we don't think so at all. So it panned out this way. Under duress, a lot of the public said, well, let me not, nobody wants to be stopped in a roadblock on a Friday afternoon and be arrested for non-payment. And these were the threats that were being made, or going to get your license renewed and finding out you can't do that, you haven't paid. So about 40% of the road users up until June 2014, that's the first 6 months, said, look, let me go and pay. But 60% said, no, we're going to stand our ground. And then as soon as David Makura announced this e-toll, a panel that was going to look at the impact of the economy, of the tolls on the economy, that's when the scheme started to fail, because the public felt this was the beginning of the end, and the compliance rates dropped right off. And you needed this thing to be over 90% to work. That's what they were confident of getting, and they didn't get over 40%. So the bulk of the people haven't paid. Those who have paid, certainly over the last 3 years or so, have mainly been businesses who passed on the cost to their customers and rentals and logistics companies. So those who've paid, we doubt very much they'll get a refund, because A, there's no money, and B, Sentinel wasn't charging them unlawfully as far as they're concerned.
Wayne Duvenage, really appreciate the time.